Okay, and we're back. Talking about respect for consumers. Now let's backtrack and think about the definitions again. Consumers are anyone who are in the interpreted situation. So that means deaf, deafblind, hard of hearing, or hearing consumers, okay? It's important that we demonstrate respect for all of the people involved in the assignment. That doesn't mean you actually have to respect them, per se, but you should at least show respect to them. So again, it's important to honor their preferences and understand and recognize the realities of qualifications, availability, and the situation, the interpreting dynamics of each situation. 4.1 says, consider consumer requests or needs regarding language preferences and render the message accordingly, interpreted or transliterated. Some of you guys this early on in your interpreting career may not know the difference between interpreting and transliterating. The example that I very often will give people is interpreting is where you are actually taking one full language and putting it entirely into the other language, taking idiomatic expressions, anything like that, and putting it into something that would be understood in the other language. Okay? Transliterating is where you take one full language and then you go into the modality of a second language, but you're still using the word order and grammar of the original language. So, for example, if I were to say in English, my nose is running, then if I were to sign that in ASL, if I were to interpret it into a second language, I would say, okay? If I were to transliterate it from English into a signed modality, I would say, I wouldn't sign, this sign, run, means to physically run, like my legs are running, okay? So if you were to sign, my nose is running, it looks like your nose just sprouted legs and started to run off. So I would use what we call conceptually accurate signing, which means this is like your nose is actually leaking a liquid, okay? Another example that I like to give of that is in Spanish, for any of you guys who are Spanish speakers. When I lived in Mexico, I was walking in the park one day with one of my Mexican friends, and man, I tell you what, people in Mexico, okay, they're just doing their business outside. People are making out all over the place. Don't know what the deal is. And so, my friend Magda and I are walking along, and we see this couple making out in the park, okay? And Magda looks at them, and in Spanish, she says, "No comen pan enfrente de los pobres," which literally translated into English means, don't eat bread in front of the poor. And I realize this, and so I look at Magda and I'm like, what? Right? What are you talking about? And she looks at me, and in English she's like, well, she has a boyfriend, and she's out here, and she's making out in public, and I wish I had a boyfriend, and blah, 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 blah. And all of a sudden I realized the concept of what she was saying, and I realized, oh, get a room. That's kind of what she's saying. And so, in essence, interpreting from Spanish to English, no comen pan enfrente de los pobres, into English would be, get a room. If you were transliterating it, it would be, don't eat bread in front of the poor, okay? So, anyway, hopefully that makes sense to you guys, but that's kind of the difference between the two. So it's important you know what modality the consumer wants you to utilize, okay? There may be specific times, even going from sign language into English, where the English speaker wants you to tell them the exact words that were used. A psychologist, for example, there may be a very particular reason why they want to know the exact words that were used, rather than your interpretation of what was being said, okay? Another time where this comes into play is when I interpret in English as a second language classes. I think it's hilarious because as an interpreter, my job is to watch sign language and to put it into grammatically correct English. And so very often I have some of the foreign students, or even the teacher occasionally, who will come up to me after I've interpreted something for the deaf student, and they'll say, wow, her English is really good. And I think to myself, Yes, my English is very good. It's my English, not her English. I'm taking her signs and putting them into my grammatically correct English. And so I have to remind very often the teacher that that's the case, that if they want to know the exact words that were signed, that I can give them that, but that I'm giving the concept of what was being conveyed to them. So, 4.2 says approach consumers with a professional demeanor at all times. People are going to get under your skin, and that it doesn't matter what profession you're in, that's just the case, and it's important that you still maintain professionalism, that you still approach people with a professional demeanor at all times, and it's going to be hard, and you're going to mess up, and that's okay, but just try to get back on the horse if you fall off, 4.3, and this is very important, obtain the consent of consumers before bringing an intern to an assignment. And as interns, you guys are going to see this. People are going to forget to tell the consumer that you're there. And so my advice to you is when you become professional interpreters, if the intern shows up and you need to obtain the permission from the consumers, make sure that the intern isn't standing there. Tell the intern, do you mind going and waiting in another room? Maybe don't even let the consumers know they're there yet, and just say, hey, there's an intern who wants to come to this assignment. Do you mind if they at least observe, or would you mind if they even tried to interpret some? But make sure the intern's not standing there when that's happening, because that puts an added pressure on the consumers, and it's really not fair to them. And it's not fair to the intern, because that makes the intern, as you guys will find out, feel very awkward as they're standing there, watching these people judge them. And as the intern, you know what? If people don't want you there, there may be some very specific reasons. You may look like their ex-wife or their ex-husband. There are a lot of reasons why they may not want you there. Maybe it's so personal that they just really don't want any extra people there if at all possible. And I get that. Don't take it personally. I know it's hard sometimes, but don't take it personally. It probably has nothing to do with you, and even if it does, just let it roll off your back, okay? And then lastly, facilitate communication access and equality, and support the full interaction and independence of consumers. Here is one of my soapboxes. I don't care what age the deaf person is. I try to support the full interaction and independence of that consumer. For example, I've mentioned that I do Sunday school interpreting sometimes, and I don't care that the person that I'm working with is a little kid. It doesn't matter. I will get to that assignment and I will ask the kid, where do you want me to stand? Do you want me to stand here or there? I'll at least give them choices. I'll say, do you want me to stand on the stage? Do you want me to stand on the ground? While the crazy hearing people are doing their hand motions, do you want to watch them, or do you want to know what they're really saying and for me to sign that? I give them choices. How do you want me to function as your interpreter? Because you know what? You control, to a certain extent at least, how I do my work. And so even as a child, I still try to give them those choices. At the same time, when there's free play, recess, those types of things, I kind of stand back, but I'm still there, and I let the consumer know, I'm here if you want me, or even some of the hearing consumers, if you want to talk to the deaf consumer, I'll let them know, I'm here. And I kind of stand back and watch, but not like, watching them. But, I'll kind of stand back and just kind of glance and make sure to see if they need me. If I see some conflict about to happen, sometimes I'll step in and say, oh, okay, what did you say? What did you say? Oh, okay, here's what they actually said, because very often it's just a misunderstanding. So it's, and again, it's one of those things that you're going to sometimes think, I overstepped my bounds, or I did too much, or I didn't do enough. But you just kind of have to feel out each situation as much as possible and support that full interaction but independence of the consumer at the same time. It's not all about me, it's about them. How do they want to interact? And sometimes it's good for them to figure out, we can write back and forth. We don't need the interpreter. That's fine. If you don't need me, perfect. Even better. So anyway, next we are going to speak on respect for colleagues. So that's it.